If you don't spend every waking moment playing Destiny 2, you might have seen or heard of VTubers, or virtual YouTubers, and more specifically, VTuber agency Hololive. Their once niche realm of entertainment has spread to the ends of the earth, peppering the YouTube recommendations of any soul with but a hint of curiosity or tangentially related interests. Perhaps your first impression came from one such clip, a Hololive Reddit post that climbed its way into r/all, or art on Twitter from the massively dedicated fans. But if your first real exposure has come more recently, it might have been via the multitude of fangames released by the Hololive community. Spanning most major game genres and ranging from faithful parodies to novel creations, this medium blossomed due to the popularity of a few early examples and has flourished ever since, with some recent games even escaping the Hololive fanbase's gravity and catching the attention of external gaming communities. A brief side note, as part of my research for this video, I looked for Cover Corporation's list of fan work guidelines. It was an easy find on their website menu, right under the hilariously titled Request to Minors, and looks something like this, if you're curious. I talked to some of the developers of these games to see what they had to say about their work and its relation to the Hololive community writ large. The lineup: Kevin Kao, best known for his platformer Small Ame; Tian Ya, the artist and dev behind this legendary Korone animation and shoot-'em-up games like Wow 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 Korone the Box; Kebi, developer of the Council Risk RPG; Fi, developer of Hollow Dungeon and other RPGs; Wonder Riku, a songwriter and producer who has worked with Fi, as well as talents Amelia Watson and Tsukumo Sana; Selrev, project director for fighting game Idol Showdown; Avraxis, Idol Showdown animator and fangame dev; and David Wu, developer of a variety of fangames and compiler of this Hololive fangames database. I was curious about these community members' backgrounds in game dev before their work on these fangames, a question that provided a pretty wide variety of responses. Kevin Kao said his game dev journey started early on in his life when he started experimenting with Visual Basic, then Dark Basic, before more learning at school.
I picked up Unity and kind of used some of my object-oriented programming skills that I learned from school. And then I'd reach a point where it's like, I don't know how to do this. So I'd go figure it out, use YouTube, or just play around and experiment.
It was a similar path for David Wu, who studied computer science in university and learned more about game development through online courses and tutorials, and Tian Ya, who started programming by experimenting with Scratch projects, as well as practicing art and music from a young age, rounding out the game dev skill set, before learning more formal languages at school and putting those skills to use in a game design degree and development job. Likewise, Wonder Riku had been a songwriter and a musician for many years before his fangame work.
A lot of it was kind of for my own sort of band projects, and I was working as a music teacher in a high school at the time as sort of my day job.
Others began their fan work at different degrees of experience.
I never worked on a professional game, per se. Before I was a fan of Hololive, I've made quite a few games through game jams and stuff like that, so I knew a bit of the engines I was using.
Kebi started without any game dev background or experience, first picking up RPG Maker and pixel art in order to create his council-themed role-playing game. And although Avraxis was an art student, he said the largely physical media he was taught made self-teaching for a lot of game art skills necessary. The Idol Showdown team, according to Selrev, also reflects this variety of members in its composition.
It's a different story for everyone involved. We don't really have like a application that we could go through or anything like that. There's no like forms or anything. It's really, really random. As for skills, I would say almost every single member of the team built up their skills through working on the game. Our lead designer had no intentions of ever doing game dev ever. He just played fighting games a lot and knew a lot about and wrote guides. He wrote a lot of guides for like Street Fighter V. Most of our programmers only had like tangential experience with Unity before starting the project. I have never had any experience leading a team this big. It's stuff that you just pick up on the spot. Across all the teams, everyone has improved significantly.
Working from such a spread of starting points, then, what motivated them to create, and why were games their medium of choice? Perhaps unsurprisingly, their answers have a lot to do with the talents themselves, as well as the greater Hololive community.
Since Council debuted, I've been watching them in particular over the pandemic. Whenever I had free time, I would turn on their streams, and I grew to be really appreciative of them and their dynamic and how they treat each other. And I found them really funny, and I wanted to express that somehow. I knew I couldn't make art. I'm not an artist. I had this idea, maybe I can try out RPG Maker if I can make pixel art, and if I can make it look decent, maybe I can start making a game. You see all these other games made by one person.
I wanted to like show some of my personal interest in Hololive while also taking chance to learn more about game development on my own time.
When the quarantine happened and all that, I then started watching Hololive. It's such a creative environment. You want to participate in some way. I always wanted to write stories and stuff like that and present them.
For some, the COVID-19 pandemic served as something of an inciting incident, providing the time and, in a way, the lack of other stuff to do to prompt such a creative commitment. Kevin and Wonder Riku said that they're among the many Hololive fans who discovered the talents during lockdown, prompted to make their fan work in different ways.
I had recently graduated from school, having trouble finding a job because of pandemic stuff. Sitting at home, stumbled across these funny anime girls and saw Wolfie's little small anime sprite and said, hey, that would be a fun character to run around as in a platformer, and then made a little prototype, and then people liked it. So yeah, I kept working on that.
When the pandemic happened, I kind of made a conscious decision. I think a lot of people had time to really reflect, being stuck at home, during that time, and sort of reflect upon like, what actually do I want to be doing with my life, and why haven't I been making time to like try and pursue my passions and my dreams? And I sort of had that realization during lockdown that, songwriting is where my heart is, and I should be pursuing that more. And I wasn't really at the time, so I made the decision to kind of go back to study and do a master's degree in songwriting.
In addition to his work for Fangames, Wonder Riku has also made music in collaboration with Hololive talents themselves, and naturally, I was curious about what that process looks like. He cited a Twitter post from Cover Corporation, a request for music creators to work with their talents, as motivation for his early Hololive fan music, building a portfolio with songs such as Reflection and Mystery of Love to take a shot at landing the job. These songs garnered attention among the community and from the talents themselves, and Amelia Watson later reached out to him asking if he'd produce her cover of Okami Blues. Wonder Riku would go on to work on original songs for both Amelia and Sukumo-sana.
Essentially, like it's a pretty easy process where I'm either kind of in contact with the managers or contact with the talents and the managers together, and I'm usually given some level of direction with what they kind of want, and then I'll kind of try and write something to fit to their brief. Or with the case of Amelia Watson with Chikutaku, she was very keen to just hear what my ideas were. With her, I kind of produced the track and put the song together, and then I wrote some kind of rough kind of demo lyrics, and then Amelia went through and sort of made some changes and tweaks and kind of got things that were a bit more reflective of exactly kind of what she wanted to say in the song.
Of course, having played and watched playthroughs of many a Fangame, I had questions for each of the other devs too. Tien Ya's website lists his favorite shoot-'em-up games, some of which he attributes as inspiration for his own Fangames. But what elements from these games did he incorporate? And how did they manifest in Wow 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 Coronibox and Elite Exorcist Miko? He said the former was mainly an experiment in implementing newly learned techniques, thus drawing heavily on Super Crate Box and Nuclear Throne for design, the product meshing the unforgiving do-or-die runs and quick restarts of the former, with the gameplay loop of the latter and the juicy visual feedback of both. With Elite Exorcist Miko, however, he wanted to take a more original design approach, taking bits and pieces of other games he enjoyed and forming a unique whole. He explained that its stage layout and pacing are reminiscent of Suguri, and the mixed melee and range combat is influenced by Nuclear Throne and Enter the Gungeon. Finally, he cited Toho as the biggest influence on Elite Exorcist Miko, namely the spell card system of varied enemy attack patterns that he said make Toho bosses distinct and memorable. These bits from existing games provide scaffolding for a game or draw in little details, and it's then up for the developer to flesh it out. Part of the challenge of making a fan game is translating the essence of the source material, in this case, the streamer's personality, community, references, and memes, into thematic and mechanical details for the game. I asked Kebby and Avraxis, who worked on 2 pretty different games, how they went about imbuing their work with these essences. The Council Risk RPG, by the nature of its genre, is character and story focused. I wanted to know how Kebby incorporated inspiration from the featured talent streams into these elements of his game.
I wanted to emphasize Council and their personalities and their story. There was a story I wanted to tell, and there were abilities that I wanted to include. There was a lot of references that I did put in that I'm very happy with. I guess it all leads back to my appreciation of the talents in the first place. When it came to making my game, it was all mental notes. I didn't research or write notes or anything about them. I just have this mental image in my brain of what they are like as a talent and as a person. I think that's the core of how I felt I was able to get their personalities right in the game for the most part.
Similarly, Avraxis and the Idle Showdown team were tasked with transforming the talents into fighting game characters, with all the mechanical traits that entailed.
Let's say we were working on Kiryu Koko. We know she's kind of goofy. She has all these draconic features to her avatar. So if there was an attack with a long range or something, then we would think maybe we could use the tail here, and that would be a more effective way to make the attack match the character, but also be kind of cool, and maybe also throw in a goofy spin to the animation, because we know she's that lighthearted kind of character.
Idle Showdown has made some waves pretty recently by breaking somewhat into the mainstream fighting game community. Several prominent FGC content creators have played the game, both increasing exposure and yielding some memorable moments. As far as I've seen, across videos, comments, and social media, the predominant sentiment in these circles has been that the game is a pleasant surprise. Now, being terrible at fighting games myself, I couldn't analyze one to save my life. I asked Selva for his thoughts on why Idle Showdown had garnered such varied appeal, both within and without the Hololive fanbase, which he noted was also a surprise to the dev team.
We thought that it's a Hololive fighting game, so we thought it was people who liked Hololive and fighting games. Instead, we calculated the and operation, not the or operation over there. I think it's even though this is silly, the fact that it's free is a pretty big deal. Barrier to entry is very low, and there's a lot of people who never would consider playing a fighting game ever, but they're like, oh, it's Hololive Girls and it's free, and they pick it up, and maybe they're like, oh, this is too tough for me, and they never play again. But sometimes they do they feel it, they feel the improvement, and they feel what it's like to really get into a fighting game. And also, of course, seeing the girls play, they probably were like, oh shoot, that's kind of cool. I want to try it out too. As for the broader fighting game group, I think most of them joined and started playing for the memes, because they're like, oh, it's the VTuber fighting game. There's no way this is good. It's free. It's okay. And it ended up being I would say a lot better than I expected. There's still a lot of bugs. I'm still trying to fix them. I think they were expecting nothing, and realizing that, oh shoot, this is actually a game. Actually, I guess they said it was fun, so I'm glad they liked it. I'm really glad they liked it.
That initial challenge is a bit of a double-edged sword. On one hand, it can serve as a barrier to entry for some, and the heart of a fighting game arguably reveals itself only once a player masters these systems, leaving them free to focus on the human element of their opponent while muscle memory and practiced precision perform the moves. However, there is a level of complexity and depth that lends itself to a more robust fighting game with greater longevity. And clearly, looking at how popular Idle Showdown has become, that initial barrier is one that many are willing to climb. Speaking of difficulty, and especially of VTubers experiencing that difficulty, I was interested to know how the computer players in Mume's Memory Juggling, one of David's games, were created, especially after seeing Mume's reactions to their performance. David said implementing this AI was one of the most rewarding game dev experiences he's had. He explained that the computer player learns card positions as they're flipped during gameplay, much like a human player, but has a set memory capacity and forgets cards after a certain number of turns. To reduce difficulty, it also comes with a mercy system that limits the number of consecutive matches that the AI player can make. These considerations came during the iterative design process David used for the originally simple Match 2 game, starting with just names and pictures, which evolved to also use voices, costumes, card effect powers, multiple playable characters, local multiplayer, and a story mode with dialogue and character sprites, each of which introduced unique challenges for development. The balancing complications, according to David, arose because of how the story mode was structured. He tuned the AI difficulty by adjusting its memory capacity and fiddling with the mercy system, with these computer opponents becoming increasingly difficult as the story progresses. A scaling that he said works great if all the opponents are faced under the same conditions. But compounding this difficulty is the increasing complexity of each story level, like a growing number of cards to keep track of, hence the suffering caused by something like the Sana AI. On the opposite end of the spectrum, Small Amit is host to a speedrunning community that has produced both impressive human runs and tool-assisted speedruns, or TAS. I actually reached out to Kevin through a speedrunning Discord server for his game, which is currently populated by over 1,000 members and 186 runners, and one Kevin. As was the case with Idle Showdown, I'm mediocre at platformers on a good day, and the only thing I've even attempted to speedrun are levels of Neon White, which, if you know how that game is designed, is less a decision and more a necessity. Kevin told me that the interest in speedrunning was a surprise to him.
It was kind of a last minute addition that I put a timer at the end of the level. I just kind of thought, oh yeah, this would be kind of neat. And I'll put a timer and then I'll like say, oh hey, here's my time on the first level. See if you can beat it. Like, I think my time on the first level was 20 seconds or something. And I was like, yeah, I've got these really cool skips that nobody's going to figure out except for me because I made the game. So I'm going to post it after people have played it for a bit, and they're going to be like, whoa, my mind's blown. I didn't know you could do that in this game. And like an hour after I released the game, like a couple users were already like finding skips that I didn't know about. Like that already crushed my time before I even told people what my time was. So yeah, so like a handful of people just kind of really got into speedrunning it really early.
Not only that, some of the stuff used in speedruns has had an effect on the overall game as well.
A bug that was like the entire speedrunning was built around where like if you ground pound on an edge, you get a whole lot of horizontal distance. And I was like, well, that's fun, but if I fix these bugs, that one goes away. So I decided to make that like an actual mechanic.
And a brief tangent here about bug fixes. According to Cellrev, this now famous Idle Showdown hotfix, which was made in response to an issue that happened while talents Calliope Mori and Tsunamaki Watame were attempting to stream the game, was made by the team's network engineer in about 10 minutes, give or take. Less time than it took them to build and push the change. That is a pretty impressive turnaround. Last, but certainly not least, I noticed that a lot of Fee's work was done in collaboration with other interviewees. Wonder Riku worked on the music for D10 Myths, and Kevin Cow was a co-designer for his games Sharky Subscribers and Big Sana. I asked Fee what the experience of partaking in the Hololive fangame community and working with these other members was like.
I always saw these people making other stuff and was super inspired by it. And being interacting with them is amazing. I think with Wonder Riku was really funny. I think I showed an in-progress clip of Olo Dungeon back in the day, and he sent me a link to fan music she did for Ame, and he was asking if you want, you can use this song, and it was really good. So I obviously did. When I went to T10, I really wanted to have the same experience. I actually commissioned and I had no experience in commission music, but it was incredible. It was great. For Kevin, I think Kevin always supported me since the start of Hollow Dungeon. And then for Big Sana was actually my first time like going to another developer and asking, hey, do you want to work on something? Because I saw he also followed a lot of Sana's work. He also liked her a lot back then. So I just asked him, hey, want to do something for a birthday? just something silly, just like a fishing game or something. And then he went, oh, sure, but we can make it 3D. And I was like, I don't work with 3D, but sure, let's try it. And it was really great to work with him.
Now, being a journalist, some kinds of questions are unavoidable in this kind of interview. They can sound generic. I'm not lazy. I'm simply doing my due diligence. And they still provide some of the most interesting answers. Here they are. What were some of the most memorable moments when developing your games?
The first thing that comes to mind is Mume. When she got into this one room with all the mirrors, she started singing Bloody Mary. And then her character brings up Bloody Mary. And it was just a beautiful moment because it looked like I predicted what she would do in that moment. And there are other moments like that with Bay and with Iris that I'm so proud of.
From David Wu, for me, some of the most rewarding game functionalities I've finished are the leaderboard system in Doog, the beatmap recorder in Riri Rhythm, and the AI for Mume's memory juggling. Whenever I finished one of these and saw it working as expected, I had this "it works" moment that filled me with absolute happiness, as each of them took me a considerable effort to implement. The most rewarding finished games for me are Doog, as it was my first ever public game, and it felt amazing to see it get such a warm welcome in the Hololive fan community, and Delivering Hope, as it was the first game I made that was picked up by talents and played on stream. Their reactions to the little references in the game are priceless to me. What makes the medium of fan games unique and separates them from other fan works or games?
There can be lack of polish in some cases that's kind of endearing. When, at least for me, when I play other fan games, those are the kinds of things I enjoy. It feels a little more homemade, a little less for profit, and those things can be something that really like attach you to a game or to a character.
From Tianya, on top of already having a substantial foundation of content to work with, creating a non-commercial fan game generally removes time and money from the equation, leaving interest in the source material as your primary incentive. This interest would need to be substantial, enough to motivate you to work on a project on passion alone. Fan games made after overcoming that hurdle tend to show soul and raw appreciation for what they're based on, and appeal especially well to audiences who are themselves familiar with the source.
I think the freedom there, you don't have to go through as many hoops with like getting approvals and stuff like that. So you can just kind of make things, you can make decisions very quickly. You can add things that are a little questionable. We have a item in the game that is Sakamata Chloe's signature item, and the effect that it does is that it makes you stinky, and the longer that you go without taking a bath, the stinkier you get, and the more damage that you deal to people when they're close to you. And there's no way to take a bath in our game, so it just goes infinitely. You just get stinkier the more you go. So it does let us sneak in a lot more references. We have to go through less approval, and we get to move really quickly.
Did you see any interesting or unexpected results from your work in fan games?
Kind of managing the attention that I suddenly got, it was overwhelming early on. I was like, wait, why are people liking this thing I made? Why are they saying good things about me? This is so weird and confusing. I'm a very introverted person, and so having to deal with kind of like so much feedback, a lot of it positive, but not all of it positive, and kind of basically be the PR team, I guess, for my game.
Something I got out of this as a non-creator is I think I can see what people enjoy about content creating. Having these a well of emotions and appreciation and the story I wanted to tell, having all of that and wanting to express that and being able to put it out there, and then having people experience that and feel the same emotions that I had.
You know, doing these songs and doing this music actually ended up getting me pretty well connected to a publisher based in the UK, where I'm from, who actually place songs in Japan and Korea. It's that pipeline from being a fan to being professional is a real thing, you know?
And finally, is there anything in particular that you would like to add?
Of all of the kind of fandoms that I've been a part of throughout my life, I've never felt so accepted and appreciated as I have within this one. You know, and respected as well. And it's an unusual feeling to have people say such lovely things about you and the work that you've done, and then being able to turn those people into like legitimate fans of your own music outside of those fandoms too, and your own creations. And that's what I see a lot of people kind of doing, which is really cool. And I massively support musicians and artists and animators and game developers who kind of follow that path. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's really cool when you see people pulling it off.
And you should be making a fan game if you are, because you enjoy making it, because you want to learn, and because it's a fun experience to share with a couple other people. There's a lot of fun to be had there, and you shouldn't let, like, whether your first or second projects hit or miss, like, impact how you continue developing in the future.
I want to see more crazy ideas, more crazy games. That's why what inspires me to also try to make more stuff and be better, because on the end of the day, these projects might be a little silly and not really viable commercially, but you also learn a lot of stuff. If someone wants to, is on the fence on, oh, I can't make a game, this is not for me, I don't know how to code, or I don't know how to do art. It's nowadays it's such a really wide environment to try stuff, so don't be afraid to try making a game, try making a silly RPG on your spare time or something like that.
And on that note, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching.